The cameras are rolling, oil executives sit perfectly still. Marco Rubio leans forward with a piece of paper, and in less than 60 seconds, the President of the United States will stand up and walk out of his own meeting to look at a ballroom. This happened live on camera, and what makes it dangerous isn't the embarrassment. It's what happens when the people watching from Beijing and Moscow realize the man in charge isn't actually in charge of himself. Stay locked in, because what you're about to hear explains how power works when focus collapses. And it's happening faster than anyone's willing to admit. The setup looks perfect. White House, oil executives, cameras positioned for maximum control. This meeting was designed to project strength, coordination, presidential command over energy markets worth trillions. Donald Trump sits across from men who move capital with phone calls, men who understand exactly what proximity to power is worth, and he starts talking, but not about policy, about himself. The praise flows first, always. Every sentence loops back to dominance, to strength, to being seen as powerful. The executives nod. They know the game, compliment the president, watch the doors open, but something shifts. Trump keeps talking, rambling now, fixating on military metaphors, armadas, waves. He mentions Venezuela like it's both conquered and still a problem. Victory declared while hinting at force. The words contradict, but the performance continues. And here's where the first crack appears. Marco Rubio does something no cabinet official wants to do on camera. He intervenes, slides a note toward Trump. Not policy, not strategy, a redirect, a reminder to focus, to stay on script. Trump's reaction reveals everything. He reads it aloud, confused, irritated. He needs to reassert dominance, even as he admits he lost the thread. The seamless transition becomes a spectacle. The executives try to continue production numbers, operations, data that matters to markets responding in real time. And Trump's attention drifts, eyes wander, body language shifts. The substance bores him now that the praise has slowed. This is where it crosses from awkward into alarming. Leadership at this level isn't performance, it's sustained focus under pressure, processing information that doesn't entertain you, sitting through details that matter even when they feel repetitive. And the President of the United States is mentally checking out of a discussion about international sanctions, energy leverage, and geopolitical positioning. Then he stands up. Mid-meeting, mid-remarks, cameras still recording. He announces he's going to tour the ballroom, not after the meeting, now, as if admiring decor suddenly outranks a policy discussion affecting billions in global capital. The room freezes. Aides panic. You can see it in their faces. The force smiles. The glances between officials trying to absorb this without letting it spiral on live television. Trump walks away, marvels at the space, comments on how beautiful it is, self-congratulation about the view, the design, the grandeur. And Fox News does something extraordinarily rare. They cut away, not because of editorial standards, because the moment became indefensible, too damaging to air without context they couldn't provide fast enough. Even a network built to protect him recognized the line had been crossed. When friendly coverage decides live footage is too dangerous, that's not bias, that's survival instinct. Here's where it turns. This isn't new behavior, this is pattern, a presidency operating on impulse over preparation, ego over responsibility, a leader who demands loyalty but cannot maintain focus, who mistakes chaos for dominance, who treats governance like a stage set for personal validation, and the system around him has adapted. Aides prepare for unpredictability like weather patterns. They craft redirect notes. They step in when focus falters. Rubio slipping that paper wasn't strategy. It was containment. The infrastructure trying to keep the machinery running when the engine misfires. This adaptation creates a shadow power structure. Unelected managers translating impulse into policy. Proximity to Trump mattering more than expertise. Flattery becoming currency. Uncomfortable truths softened or buried because they disrupt momentum. And this plays out in real time during that meeting. Executives choose words carefully. They praise, they compliment, they keep Trump engaged without challenging him. Policy discussion becomes performance, substance secondary to maintaining favorable mood. Here's what people miss: these meetings are never spontaneous. Every word pre approved, every transition rehearsed, every signal calibrated for markets, allies, adversaries watching from capitals across the world. None of that preparation matters when the person at the center refuses to follow the script, refuses to recognize the script exists to maintain stability. The stakes weren't theoretical. Sanctions affecting Russia, energy markets tied to China's manufacturing base, regional power balances in the Middle East, billions in future access. And the man making decisions about all of it just walked away to admire a room. Beijing watches this. Moscow watches this. They see a president more engaged by scenery than substance, more responsive to compliments than briefings, and they adjust their strategies accordingly. They discount his statements. They seek back channels to aides. They place greater weight on signals from Rubio, from advisors, from anyone except Trump himself. This effectively redistributes American power away from the elected leader toward an unelected network of managers. And when that happens, accountability diffuses, praise and blame harder to assign, democratic oversight weakens, and that's when things changed, because everyone in that room seemed prepared for this, ready with notes, ready with redirects, ready with contingency plans, as if presidential unpredictability had become an assumed variable rather than a crisis requiring intervention. When unpredictability becomes assumed, standards shift, accountability softens, the line between governance and improvisation disappears, and citizens watching have no idea who's actually making decisions or why. The meeting eventually stumbles forward. Aides guide conversation back on track. Executives return to prepared remarks, but the impression burns in. The real work happens around Trump, not through him. Governance has become containment exercise rather than leadership. The most revealing part isn't any policy statement, it's the quiet acknowledgement by everyone involved that unpredictability is now the defining feature. Something to manage, mitigate, endure, not address. This is adaptation without correction, and adaptation without correction always extracts a price. That price accumulates in ways most people never see. Delayed decisions as aides wait for clarity. Mixed signals to allies trying to interpret contradictory statements. Confusion among agencies tasked with implementation. Normalization of behavior that would have triggered resignations in previous administrations, like a president abandoning a policy meeting to tour a ballroom. Professionals inside the system pick up the slack. They translate impulsive remarks into actionable policy. They reassure foreign partners that offhand comments won't become doctrine overnight. They monitor markets for reactions to statements never meant as statements. This constant translation drains institutional energy, pulls focus from long-term strategy toward short-term stabilization, and nowhere is this more dangerous than foreign policy and energy markets, where casual remarks move prices, where vague promises trigger investment decisions, where offhand dismissals undermine leverage built over years. When observers worldwide see a president more engaged by atmosphere than analysis, they adjust. They discount his words. They seek information from people around him, people who can actually maintain focus long enough to execute coherent strategy. This meeting with oil executives exposed the dynamic with unusual clarity. Praise opens doors, proximity amplifies influence, distraction creates space for those prepared to fill it. The executives weren't there out of civic duty, they were there because access is profitable. Because when a leader is erratic, those who know how to flatter him, redirect him, wait him out, they benefit most while everyone else scrambles. And this perception doesn't require corruption. It only requires ambiguity, the appearance that influence flows through personal rapport rather than public process. Trust in institutions depends on the belief that decisions follow analysis, not impulse, not applause, not whoever offered the last compliment before attention drifted. And when viewers see a president more energized by compliments than policy briefings, more attentive to decor than geopolitical consequences, that trust erodes, not dramatically, steadily. The consequences extend beyond Trump's administration. Every future leader inherits a system shaped by precedent. When precedent shifts toward spectacle over seriousness, the bar lowers, the margin for error narrows, the risk of miscalculation grows, especially in areas where signals get scrutinized by adversaries looking for weakness to exploit. Here's the final turn. The question isn't whether Trump can focus during meetings. The question is what happens when institutions designed to support leadership spend all their energy compensating for its absence. When governance becomes dependent on intermediaries who interpret mood rather than analyze data. When the most powerful office on earth operates in constant reactive mode, adjusting to impulse instead of executing strategy. History shows systems stretched to absorb unpredictability eventually reach breaking points, not because of single moments, because of normalization across many. And what that meeting revealed wasn't a policy position, it was a gap between the gravity of the office and the behavior on display. A gap that staffing cannot close, that scripting cannot bridge, that media framing cannot erase, because no amount of management substitutes for engagement at the top. Trump stands in that ballroom now. Cameras have moved to other stories. Headlines crystallize and fade. But the mechanisms of power continue adapting, bending around personality, compensating for distraction. And the people tasked with making the system function understand something the public is only beginning to see. This is what power looks like when attention fractures and responsibility diffuses across networks nobody elected. Foreign governments adjust their approaches to America accordingly. They calibrate their strategies around Trump's advisors rather than Trump himself. They test boundaries when they sense distraction. They delay commitments when they see unpredictability. Courts watch this, prosecutors watch this, political opponents watch this. They see a pattern of behavior that raises fundamental questions about fitness, about judgment, about what happens when the weight of the office seems lighter than it should be. And the responsibility to notice, to question, to demand accountability shifts back to the public, to citizens who must decide whether they accept governance by improvisation, whether they accept distraction as leadership style, whether they accept the slow erosion of standards simply because challenging it feels harder than adapting to it, because the cost isn't paid in headlines, it's paid in trust, in institutional resilience, and in the quiet normalization of behavior that weakens the system everyone depends on. And Trump continues operating as if meetings, briefings, and policy discussions are interruptions to the performance he actually cares about, while the world watches, adjusts, and prepares for the consequences his attention span cannot predict.